Hi, I am Michael Santos with Prison Professors, and it's Tuesday morning, August the 4th. I just wanted to give an update on another letter that I got from prison, and this one came from Robert, who is an inmate at the Administrative United States Penitentiary in Thomson, Illinois. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the federal prison system, the penitentiary in Thomson is a similar to the ADX, which is one of the highest security federal prisons in the nation. So people there are generally on lockdown. They generally get there because of some type of a program that their administrators have assigned. Ordinarily, to go to that type of a facility, it's generally for some behavior challenges that the person has had while he was in custody. Generally, they either participated in a riot, they participated in escapes, they participated in assaults against staff or other inmates. Perhaps they are considered to be people of influence with regard to gangs and things of that sort. So they put them in this really high security penitentiary type of environment that really limits their behavior, limits their movement, limits their contact with other people. And all of that, administrators will argue, is for the security of the institution. Some people don't mix well in general populations. And the letter that I received is from that institution. And I wanted to read it because as I was reading it, parts of it reminded me of some of my early adjustment when I was in prison that I wanted to share in case you have a loved one in prison and you're getting letters like this and you may not quite understand what's going on. So he starts off, how are you doing? You notice it's handwritten. He goes from line to line. And the reason that people in jail or prison do that is because there's a limitation on how much paper they have. And so they want to get as much content on the page as possible. At least that's what I went through when I was there. So how are you doing, Mr. Santos? It's printed. It's printed neatly. I can read it very well. He has a pen, which surprises me because generally when I was in that type of an environment, a high security penitentiary, particularly in segregated housing unit, and living in an administrative facility is very much like living in segregated housing, they don't give us pens. They didn't used to give us pens. They used to give us little pencils because pen could be used as a weapon. So how are you doing, Mr. Santos? I just finished perusing a book. Now, the first thing that stands out at me is the word perusing. And the reason that stands out at me is because I really was making an effort to try and develop my vocabulary when I was in there. I knew that I was in prison, and if I didn't train myself to speak in a language that I believed would be more acceptable in society, people would always look at me as a prisoner. And ordinarily in conversation, I don't know that we would use the word peruse, right? I would just say, I just finished reading a book. But he said, I just finished perusing a book. And so it leads me to believe that from the book, he took some lessons immediately. This is the first thing that stands out for it. Immediately, he took some of the lessons that I spoke about in there about the importance of developing a vocabulary. How are you doing, Mr. Santos? I just finished perusing a book authored by you called Earning Freedom. It is ironic how I serendipitously stumbled upon your book. Right? Another big word, serendipitously. I just caught it. It just fell into my hands some kind of way. I am currently housed at Thomson, United States Penitentiary, and we are on lockdown due to the coronavirus epidemic. It is affecting the natural functioning of the entire planet. Thomson USP was once an administrative United States penitentiary. You had to meet certain criteria just to be accepted in this program. And though this location is way out of my region, I made the conscious decision to submit a transfer request because Hazleton United States Penitentiary was incongruous to how I wanted to do the remainder of my time. So USP stands for United States Penitentiary, and that means it's the highest security level besides administrative maximum security. Okay? So the people inside of a United States penitentiary are going to be people that administrators have identified as being either more volatile, violent. A lot of times they'll have violent criminal histories or histories of escape. And of course, all of that information comes from the custody and classification schedule. So you kind of need to understand the custody and classification schedule to know how administrators are going to look at you. See, I am a repeat offender. So if there's one thing I am familiar with, it is recidivism. The difference with this time that I am serving now, as opposed to the other times that I have served, is that I left my daughter out there in unfavorable conditions, and I am living with the results of my decision for the next few years. That's something that really weighs on people when they're in prison, is you start to process, all of our bad decisions and all of the fallout, the collateral consequences that stem from our behavior and what we have done. When I came into the system, my daughter was 4 years old. She is 9 years old now, so we know he's been in prison for 5 years. But she will be a teenager upon my release. So apparently he doesn't have too much time to go. I guess he could have 10 more years to go. I am helplessly watching the debilitating effects of my absence. It is not only having on our relationship, but her education as well. So he's recognizing that his time in prison is having an influence on the development of this child, and it's hurting him. It is disheartening to observe how many of my rash decisions thwart the natural affinity of a father and a daughter relationship. Again, this to me strikes me as that he's really paying attention to the book. It makes it a little bit harder to read a letter. And I used to have this challenge. When I used to write letters from when I was in the penitentiary, a lot of times they were filled with all of these words that I was learning. But this was my way of self-education. And I've got some funny stories about that as well. One of the perks that was offered to the residences of the work cadre was a single cell. So he went there for a very specific reason. Probably one, he wanted to get away from the volatility of the United States Penitentiary in Hazleton, and two, he wanted to be alone. This incentive is one of the many that is being taken due to the transition of the institution, in which is concomitant with the new administration. As I sit back in my condition of the solitude of self-reflection that is imminent, I come to the conclusion that if I want to break the cycle of recidivism that I have grown accustomed to and salvage the relationship with my daughter, it has to start now. So, to recognize the benefit of, I to recognize the benefit, I see. So there was a misspelling, that's why I didn't understand it. So he's saying, so I too recognize the benefit of writing a book and how it can help me establish a platform for what I want to do and what I want to become upon my release. And I really love that. I love that when somebody in prison starts to see that there are steps that they can take right now. There are seeds that they can start to sow right now to begin building a better life. So with this idea of mine comes extensive research and the use of the limited resources that are at my disposal. While searching for anything that can assist me with the task at hand, I came across one of my fellow inmates. And he just happened to have your book. He's an aspiring writer. And he intends to write a book similar to yours that is about prison. But he said the book that he is trying to write is going to also capture the tumultuous nature of confinement. He said that he read your book and he described the manner in which you did your time as pusillanimous, leaving me with the preconception before I could even read the cover. So, pusillanimous. It is of one of those words that I would have to look up. I remember it was part of my vocabulary lesson building when I was in prison, but I think that when I look it up, I think it meant weak, as I recall. In fact, I can Google it right now, pusillanimous, and yes, it means showing a lack of courage, determination, or being timid, okay? So, the person who gave him Earning Freedom, when he described how I was served my time, he said, just happen to have your book, he said it was pusillanimous, so I was weak or timid or lacking in courage and determination. That's an interesting perception, but there you have it. Fortunately for me, I have always taken pride in my attempts to have a mind of my own. And even as I involved myself with the criminal subculture in society, I never perceived my violence and my violent acts as one of venerable qualities, but more of a requisition. I've been vainly trying to disassociate myself from the subterranean lifestyle, only to be defied by seemingly compelling circumstances. And he emphasizes the word seemingly. As I digest the contents of the book, the depiction of these dehumanizing conditions and the sentiment was captured with a defined precision. It instilled a sense of hope that I have been unable to top it for a long time. I've been unable to top in. Oh, it instilled a sense of hope that I had been unable to tap into for a long time. You touched on living a life of relevancy in society, and that's what my mission today is like. You also wrote about Viktor Frankl and how he highlighted that finding purpose is essential to survival. I read that book so many years ago and haven't come across it since. You talked about owning the conduct which led to the conditions is rudimentary to surmounting these undesirable circumstances. Sometimes the windward temperament is persuasive throughout the penal system. Windward was the name of one of my cellmates when I was locked inside of a high security penitentiary. And he had a temperament that is similar to just about everybody else in the penitentiary. I often feel overwhelmingly taken over by the subculture of prison. It is difficult to find someone to have a meaningful conversation with because of the common interests associated with the mundanity. I think it's the mundane nature of the present conditions from a myopic aspect, or they're pedantic. So he's using a lot of words here that make it harder to read the letter, but I understand what he's trying to do. He's showing me that he is making an effort in developing vocabulary. And I can assure you, I will be writing him a letter today and sending him a new workbook that I hope will help him. After reading your book, I took it upon myself to ask the guy here to give me the book. Why did he think you took the cowardly way of doing time? I asked him. His answer didn't even warrant a response. In my eye, you are one of the bravest men I have heard of, and I am using your story as an outline for a way that I plan to serve the remainder of my time. They say integrity is doing what is right when no one else is watching. But I have added that in certain situations it could be doing what is right when everybody is watching. This version of integrity is contingent on the circumstances and the influence it has on our natural behavior. This not only is being displayed in prison, but it is also observed in today's politics. And he signs his name. So I have his writing address if you want to write to him. His name is Robert Horne. His registration number is 30924-007. He's held at the United States Penitentiary Administrative Prison. The address is P.O. Box 1002, and it's in Thomson, Illinois. That's Thomson, Illinois, 61285. He wrote me this letter on June 29th. It's now August the 4th, but it's because he wrote it to an address that I have in the Bay Area of California, so it took a little while to get to me. But I do hope that these letters that I receive from people in prison that I share with our audience here at Prison Professors shows that if a person gets inspired by somebody, if a person starts to see himself as something more than where he is right now, even if he's got a violent history, even if he's in a high security penitentiary, that person could start sowing seeds for a better life. And that's one of the ways that we strive to help people, is by giving away this information. We've got a lot of books and a lot of courses. They're certainly available if you visit us at prisonprofessors.com and click the store. If you click the show notes below this page, I'm actually going to try and, I can't put the text because I can't copy and paste because it's handwritten, but I will take a picture of it and leave it on the screen so that you could read it and see it's an authentic letter. And I hope that you will find some value in this kind of message. If you haven't subscribed to the program already, I do hope that you will subscribe. Because we produce content every day with hopes of helping people if they're facing sentencing or prison, or their administrators that want to create programs and bring programs into the prisons. We do hope that you will subscribe. We'd also hope that you would visit our sponsors at cbdtv.com. They make it possible for us to produce this content. Pretty excited today because I've got an interview with a director of one of the state's largest prison systems to speak about bringing our program in to the institution. This is something that I strive to do. I work pretty hard at it, invest a lot of hours to try and bring these programs so that we can teach and inspire people who are in jail and prison. I think that sometimes people have a level of, I guess we kind of put some weighting on how much credence we're going to put into the information that we receive. And when people see that I was incarcerated for 26 years and now I'm doing this work, striving to bring more attention inside, they are more receptive to the message. Some of them are. This other person thought that I would serve my time in a pusillanimous manner. But that's just part of the journey. You can't please everybody. But what I can do is try and show everybody the pathway that worked for me and encourage people to find the pathway that's going to work for them. And that's what Prison Professors is all about. So we're glad to have you as a part of our community. I do want to encourage you to leave notes, subscribe. One of these days, I'm going to learn how to do these live YouTube channels or maybe a live Facebook channel. And I've got to figure out how to schedule that because I'd really like to have more of an interactive engagement with the members of our community. Do hope that you will pass it along and stay a member of our community. Thank you.